Hello everyone, welcome back to my videos as always. Today, this week, I got to see two movies. I got to see the new Naked Gun movie, even though it's more like a legacy sequel in that aspect, and I got to see Weapons. And I'm going to start with a bit of a movie that I was very much interested in seeing. And basically, Weapons here is basically directed by Zach Gallagher, who also directed, I think it was 2022's or 2023's Barbarian, which is a movie I also really enjoyed. And with a movie like that and with a movie like this, I would describe his own little bit of a genre-esque movie making in the aspect of a much more suburban horror genre of its own. And I really kind of admire that creativity about his movies. And for me, I thought, personally, Weapons, and this might get me killed here or whatever, I think Weapons is kind of overrated when it comes to the acclaim and everything all these critics have had around this movie. And I'm not going to really give away much of the premise. It's basically surrounded. The story about this movie is basically surrounded around this group of majority of this kids of a classroom who go missing, except for the teacher and one kid. And basically, it surrounds the story of the teacher of the situation, the kid, one of the parents of the kids who went missing, the principal, and a cop character, a police officer character who used to be a flame, who used to be a romantic interest of the teacher, played by Julia Garner, who, by the way, I forgot to bring up in my Fantastic Four review that she played Silver Surfer in that movie, and I thought she was really, really great in that. I thought she was really, really great in that role. I really liked her a lot in that movie. I thought all the actors in this movie did a really strong job. I thought its overall story and narrative and the idea within it was really interesting. And I think I want to bring up a really good point here. There's a distinctive difference between story and plot. The plot is what is the overall of what's going on. Actually, I would say the difference between story and plot here is basically the same difference between strategy and tactics. One is a general overview of what's happening, and the other one is the point by point by point of how it happens in the moment. And yeah, the plot of this movie is one I really thought was interesting, and the story was one I quite liked. How do I say this without sounding like a true jerk-like contrarian here? I liked both, but I didn't really think the story of this, the actual story of how it goes beat by beat by beat, was one I thought was really an engaging one to really suit the overall story. Like, yes, I get it. Like, a bunch of kids go missing from this classroom, except for one kid and the teacher, and everyone's perspective is focusing on that. You know, like how, like the teacher himself, the kid at one point, a police officer, and all that. And here's my point. The plot I thought was really interesting, and the story was engaging unto itself. I just didn't really think they would mesh all that great together. They kind of do, but here's my biggest point about this movie. When I watched the trailer for this movie, I set up this, admittedly on my own, an unfair perspective to have. When seeing the trailer for this movie, I thought to myself, no matter what answers the movie actually gives, it's just not nearly as interesting as the setup itself. Because in my mind, it's like when you have this, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these questions that go haywire, because when you see the trailer, like, oh my gosh, what's happening, it's really interesting and engaging. And this movie, more than anything else, is technically a horror thriller. But as I said, the director makes these much more suburban thriller mid-dramas of their own. And essentially, to be told, every movie at its center needs to be a drama, because you ought to care about the characters and the stakes of what's happening. And the movie does, but when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was just thinking to myself, no matter how good these And no matter how good the actual execution of the movie may be, it's way more impactful when it's so much more psychological and you draw your own conclusions from the much more subjective nature of the film. And the movie, in my opinion, gives too much of answers along the way. And I'm not saying, oh, I would have done a better job. No. But I felt like this is a great idea of a movie that I just didn't need answers towards. To be fair, the actual craft and writing of all of this was really good, but I knew from the trailers to the movie to the actual scene and everything, I just felt like I don't think I needed the answers. It's so much more creepy, and it kind of told out the story in a way where I felt it didn't really keep up on the tension as much as it could. It told it much more, as the movie actually is in its own right, a much more suburban kind of thriller drama. And I felt like it could have, and because this movie takes inspiration from like movies because the director of this movie said it took inspiration from other movies I really like 2013's Prisoners and Magnolia and a couple other movies. And I like the idea of that, but I don't think it really meshes into a story that I thought was really worth it in the end. To be fair, the movie's actual essence of the craft and the way it ends has that sweet kind of poetic justice as good writing should. But for me personally, I just don't think I needed these answers, and it told in a way where I don't think it kept its true pedal on the gas for the horror thriller aspect of it, and it lead more into the family drama. Instead, in my mind, I would have just kept that horror thriller angle of it towards a little bit more of the end and have it unravel at the same time. To be fair, the movie technically does, but so much of these tangents of the movie selling off this cop storyline drama of his own, of him and his drama, and him with a homeless person and everything, I felt like it was just a bit too convenient at times with the narrative and the characters, where it found I wouldn't say extrude disbelief, but a part of me was just kind of like, okay, where's this going? I'm kind of rolling my eyes at times. And it does lead up to a good finale of its own, but a part of it was kind of like, okay, that's a leap of faith. Okay, there's a couple of movies, like a movie in its own right will have that kind of moment where you go, okay, whatever, it's got to be a movie. But this movie has a few too many times where that happens, and the plot contrivance at moments, and the plot narrative contrivances at times felt like they were just missing at times. Like, I get this movie trying to play much more on the internal themes of the hysteria and thrill and the fear and the loss of that. But when you and the themes of that, but when you try and do that with the interconnected storylines and the internal mechanism of how the story prevails, I felt like this movie was spreading itself a bit too thin at times. As I said, because the movie, if anything, circles around these 4 to 5 characters. The principal, the school, the teacher. My favorite storyline of this movie, being personally, in my view, was of Josh Brolin as one of the kids' fathers who was missing. And I thought his sense of weight and authority and anger and anguish in that was personally my favorite of the entire movie. And there's others, like with Benedict Wong as the principal, and this drug dealer dude, and the cop played by Alden Ehrenreich. If some of you forget, he played Han Solo in that one mediocre Solo movie. But I felt like this movie was a bit too caught up in its own right to tell this narrative, instead of keeping it simple and thorough, and building it to a much more conclusive narrative, meanwhile keeping its focus much more on the horror thriller instead of a drama. And the movie tries to be more drama than anything, but I feel like it just wasn't nearly as creepy, as eerie, or anything as it should be all the way through. And instead of having good levity moments, there's plenty of moments where it does have those good moments of levity where you kind of sit and breathe and relax and have fun with it. But instead, there's times within this movie where the audience where I was in, I felt like I was laughing at the movie rather than with the movie. And I don't know really personally all about that. There's a couple moments that do work of comedy and levity and stuff like that, but there's moments where I felt like I was just laughing at the movie, at the absurdity of it, rather than really being invested in what's happening. It tried to be a bit too much of everything. It felt like, and I don't want to address like online culture or whatever. I felt like all the criticisms everyone had towards 28 years later with this movie, I feel like I finally get that criticism. I'm like, okay, I see what you mean. And by the end of it, I'm just kind of going, I enjoyed it. I thought its internal story and everything, it was really well done. But I felt like it could have been more if it leaned more into the narrative focus of the horror thriller rather than a more thriller-based family drama of its own. And personally speaking, the answers they gave weren't nearly as nails, like, white knuckling it as I should have been. And in my view, that's my overall opinion on Weapons. Out of 100%, I would personally give this movie a 64%. I think it's a thoroughly good, well-made. I'm gonna give it a 67%, and that's my overall. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think technically it's a good movie, but I just don't think these answers in it should have been answered in a way that they were. Like, it could have been something so much more else, rather than for what it was. And for the answers it gives, I'm just going, that's a bit too silly for my taste, or it played it too early in a way where it felt like it was too anticlimactic, where it was too weird at times for my taste. But hey, that's my review. Thank you for watching. As always, until then, I'll see you in my next review for The Naked Gun. Cheers.